Okay, it's time to officially create our first Android app in Eclipse. So let's go and get stuck into that. Okay, so here I am yet again in my developer folder, the folder where I've downloaded and installed the Android developer tools. So I'm going to go in there, probably know how to do this by now, into the Eclipse subfolder, and we're going to start Eclipse. Okay, I'm going to select the same workspace that I've been using right throughout the course so far. Click OK. Now you will get funny little errors like this from time to time that pop up, and I think personally it's got something to do with the fact that the Android developer tools are built on top of Eclipse. We got an error there seemingly for no reason, but then it corrected itself without me doing anything. So don't get too sort of freaked out if you do find you get errors. Sometimes you'll find you'll get little red errors down here on the left hand side, and it'll seem that I can't find an Android package or something. The solution is quite a simple one. If you do get that, click on to Project, click on Clean, make sure Clean All Projects is selected, and click on OK. And that effectively rebuilds it. You can see the little red indicators that came on briefly on the screen, and then it corrected and got rid of all the errors. So more likely than not, just doing that will correct a lot of the common issues that Eclipse sometimes has when you're creating projects. So we've got our test project there from the last video, the Eclipse walkthrough. I'm going to delete that now, basically just to show you how to delete a project, and because we don't need it for this particular new project that we're creating. So to delete a project, click it, right click, select delete. Now it does come up and say, do you want to also remove the project contents on disk? Yes, we do want to do that, and you can see this is the folder where all the files are going to get removed. Where I carry that, click on yes, and it disappears. Now you notice the application compatibility file has stayed there, and that's because that's shared for all projects you create in that workspace. So you can do the same thing if you prefer to, just to start with a clean slate, delete it. And again, it shows you the folder. Are you sure? Yes. Delete. All right, so back with a clean slate now, so let's create our new project. So I'm going to go up to File, select New, Android Application Project. Now for the test project name, or the application name, I'm going to type in My First App. Now you notice that project name automatically gets filled out, but it hasn't got any spaces, and that's because the project essentially is used internally by Eclipse, and it doesn't allow you to have spaces or any special characters. Now that brings us to the package name. Now this is an important thing to get right. Basically, the package is a globally unique identifier. So it has to be something, particularly when you go to upload your package, your game, or your application, whatever you're creating, to the Google Play Store, or any other Android store for that matter, the package name itself has to be unique. You cannot, you cannot be the same as any other one. So a common way of doing that is to actually change it to your domain name. So if you've got a domain name, for example, I've got a domain name called Funky Squid. So you could type it in reverse domain order. So the last part of the domain first, then the first part. So com.funkysquid.myfirstapp. Now that could be a package name that will work because no one else owns the domain funkysquid.com. So by doing this, I'm guaranteed of having a unique package name. So generally that's the best way of doing it. There are other ways though. You can come up with some sort of unique identifier. It doesn't have to be a domain. That's just one that works well. Now keep in mind with the package name, it is actually seen globally. So people will get to see that package name. So keep that in mind when you're, whatever you're creating there will be seen publicly by your, potentially by the people who are downloading your app. So to give you an example of that, I'm just going to go to the Google Store. I'm going to open up Safari. I'm going to go to Google. We'll do a search for one of my games on the Android store. And I'm just going to click the first entry because that's my game. Now I just want to show you the package name. Now you can see here, I'll just OK that message about Flash. This little part here on the screen, on the URL, it's got ID equals com.funkysquid.flipfrenzygame. So when I created the game Flip Frenzy, the package name was com.funkysquid.flipfrenzygame. And you can see that that's publicly available and people can see that when they go to the App Store. So again, I just wanted to show you a real world example of that and for you to keep that in mind that people can basically see that. All right, let's go back to Eclipse. So for this example, I'm not going to use Funky Squid. I suggest you just use an example because we're not going to be uploading these test apps, at least not without adding more functionality. And package name com.example.myfirstapp. You will get a warning message there saying it's meant as a placeholder. So what you can do is change the com to org. So we've now got org.example.myfirstapp. If and when you decided to upload this app to the App Store, you would have to change that completely. In actual fact, I believe Google Play won't even allow you to use that when you go to upload it. But for now, for testing purposes, it's all right for us to be using this because, of course, we're not going to be uploading this to the App Store. Okay, next thing is the minimum required SDK. Now, this is also an important one. This is the lowest level of API that the application is going to support. So when we say that it supports, it's devices that are running that version of the Android SDK. Now Froyo, Android 2.2 is quite an old version. That's the API 8. That goes back a number of years ago, and I do know that in terms of market share, the market share is under 1%. So in other words, if you'd left that in there, you're catering for like less than 1% of the potential Android market, and there's a lot more work for you to do to make it work for them. Because as you can imagine, each new version of an SDK that comes out introduces new features. So looking at today's Android 5 and comparing that back to Android 2.2, there's been an incredible amount of things that have changed over that period of time. So, if you wanted to support Android 2.2 for some reason, a lot of those features aren't going to work for them. So you would have to add additional programming code to somehow sort of do something instead of that functionality that's working in the current version. So in other words, you're just really giving yourself a lot of headaches, and in this case, for less than 1% of the market. So just looking at that list, the next version probably to consider targeting would be Gingerbread. Now that's Android 2.3 and 2.33. Current estimates are that's around about 11% of the market, give or take, people who are running an old version like that. And this is keeping in mind some Android devices cannot be upgraded. It's physically they're not able to be upgraded, or they're just very basic devices. Perhaps they're not smart devices, they haven't got any upgrade capability. So you will find there'll be some devices that are just so old that we can't do much with them. So Gingerbread now is getting to the stage where it's probably out of date, around about 11% of the market, 10 or 11% I believe. So looking at bypassing honeycomb and moving to ice cream sandwich, around about 10% of people are running ice cream sandwich at the moment. So what I actually suggest you do is you bypass all of these and you set your minimum version to API 16. Because there's still probably around about 21% of people who are still running API 16 or lower, Jelly Bean, and I think that's a good intermediate sort of target. And of course, now that Android 5's out, we will find a lot more people will be upgrading. So my suggestion, and what I'll be doing throughout this course, is the minimum required SDK is going to be API 16. Now with the target SDK, what I generally recommend you do there is you just select the very latest edition. So API 21, now it's saying Android 4.xl preview, and that's because Android SDK version 5 hasn't been officially released at the time of me shooting these videos. So probably what you'll see when you go to follow along with what I'm doing in this video, that'll probably say Android 5.0. The main thing is API 21 is what we want to select. I would normally recommend you select API 21 for both of those there. Some people suggest you go back to the previous version. So in this case, we wouldn't select KitKat Wear because, of course, that's just for wearable devices like watches. So perhaps you could go back and target Android 4.4 if you wanted to. But I wouldn't. I would recommend you just stick with API 21 because we've already entered our minimum requirement, and I think we're good to go. Now lastly, the theme is the sort of the default theme that's used in the application. I normally just go with the default, but you can choose to have no theme or just to choose like a variation of those. At this stage I'm just going to select the Holo Light with dark action bar, which is the default, and click on next. Okay, so moving on, we're going to leave a lot of these options, or in fact all of these options, as defaults. And the first option is we want to create a customized launcher icon. An icon is what you see on the Android device or in the emulator, which I'll show you in the next video. It's basically what you see when you tap it to actually start an application. So we've got the ability here to create that icon. We also want to create an activity. Activities is something we are going to be talking more about as we go through the course, but think of an activity, when you see the word activity, think screen. So usually it's a one-to-one relationship. If you see an activity, that relates to a screen in your Android application. We'll leave that for now. We'll talk about that later on. Now, creating the project, you can see it's just giving you an option of where it's going to be storing our app. And we can change that if we want. If we wanted to override that and put that somewhere else. But obviously we've created the workspace for a purpose. We're going to leave it in there. Click on next. And we're now at the stage where we can create a launcher icon. Now probably what I would recommend you would generally do is you'd get an icon professionally done, or you'd use a Photoshop package or something of that nature. And you would create your icon and you'd literally just click on browse. And you'd go to whatever the particular folder was containing your icon, and you'd select it that way. But there is the option within this package, when we're creating our new Android application, to create our own icon. And there's a couple of options. What I'll do first is show you the text option. So you can see here on the right hand side, this is going to show you a preview of what the icon will look in the different sizes. And in the walkthrough videos in the next section, and we're going to be looking at what these terms are: MDPI, XHDPI, and so on. But think of those essentially as icons for different sizes, or different devices that have got different resolutions. So we could put something in the icon to make it show up. I can put my name, for example. And we can change the font if we wanted to. Let's just choose Menlo. Perhaps we'll change the size and make it a bit bigger. Okay, I've changed the icon, and we can trim the surrounding space. Now if we don't do that, it doesn't make a lot of difference here, but it does make more of a change when we get into clip art, which I'll show you shortly. We can center it again. You can't really see much in the way of changes there. You will see that a little later on. We can also put a square around it. So we can put our icon with a square around it, or a circle, and we can change background colors. We'll choose an orange. Oh, so background, I chose foreground there. So that's one very basic idea of an icon. And by the way, we can change this padding as well if we wanted to. You can notice that as I increase it, it's increasing the padding between the text and the outside part of the icon, and obviously going back down does the opposite. So again, I wouldn't generally suggest you use this because it doesn't look the best, and it's probably best, certainly if you're at the stage of creating an app, of uploading an app, to get a professional to help you with the artwork. But that's the text version. Clip art, go into clip art. You have got some other options here which are pretty cool. So if you click on choose, there is a set of default clip art images that are included with Eclipse, which is nice. So we've got all sorts of different ones here. I'm going to choose the world, which is basically because we're running our first Hello World application. So I've chosen the world. I've still got the default colors. I could change that to something else, maybe more a blue. I might make that less padding perhaps. Crop it if we want to, do it that way. Again, you can choose no shape if you prefer it not to be shaped at all. I don't mind the circle one. So you can see that by default, there's a couple of good options there for you creating icons. Obviously, I'm no artist, so I'll leave you to your own devices of creating something better. But it has got a good basic option. So keep that in mind, that it's there and it is available. And just one other thing that I want to make clear here. This is the icon. So when we were in the text section, this is what's going to be seen on the icon. There's still the text below the icon, which is sort of a textual representation of the actual name of the application itself. And if we go back, that's this thing here. So basically what you type in the application name, that is what you're going to see, as a label under the icon where you go to actually start the application itself. So I'm going to go back to where we were. You can go back to clip art. I'm going to put that in a circle. A bit more space. It looks fairly horrendous, but it is only a test, so we'll continue with that. We click on next. Now on this screen, we're going to choose blank activity. If you remember, that activity is essentially a screen. Now there's all sorts of other options, and as you click them, it sort of gives you a visual representation on the type of project it's going to create for you by default. And we'll be looking at some of these as we progress through the course as well anyway. But for this first one, we're keeping things simple. We're going to go just with a blank activity. Okay, and activity name and layout names will make more sense when we do our walkthrough and we start going through to these in detail. They're good defaults for now, so we're just going to leave those and click on finish. So at this stage, we've now got our application created. And you can see that that's giving us a visual representation of what it's going to look like, much like it looked like previously when we set it up and actually ran it in the Eclipse preview video. So at this point, we're actually done. There's not a lot more to show you. I just want to quickly go through and show you some of the project properties and so on. But in the next video, I'm going to go through and show you what it actually looks like in the Android virtual device and also on a physical device. But to get access to the properties, you can just click on the name of the project, basically at the highest level, and you can go into project and select properties. You've got all sorts of options here that you can use to override. You can see that we've selected the Android 5. You remember that we chose the API level. There's all sorts of other things now that's probably outside of the scope of what we're talking about to get into them. But then run debug settings, we're going to talk about that in the next video. Basically telling Eclipse how this application will be run. Will it be run on an emulator? Will it be run on your real device, etc.? So we'll talk about that then. And there's lots of other things, but I think I'll finish the video now. We've been talking long enough. So let's move on to the next video where we're going to go through and actually run this created project.